Well, our lesson last week was pretty short, and we're going to make up for it today. And I promise that you will not want to skip it. It's a great revelation from the Lord about the Israelites and their desert moment. God promised Abraham the land of Canaan. However, Israel became enslaved by Egypt after the time of Joseph and the 7 plagues. They spent 400 years growing as a nation, right? That was divine, growing as a nation, but also as slaves. And so Yahweh is saving them from the Egyptians through the leadership of Moses, the one he pardoned in the desert. Exodus 12 tells us the Israelites were thrust out of Egypt to their first campsite, Succoth, where God attended them in a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And this is where we're going to start to tag along. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country. It was much shorter, but you're going to see why he didn't do that. Let's look at Exodus 13. For God said if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt armed for battle. So from the biblical text, we can see that the Israelites did not take the normal route from Egypt to Canaan. This road paralleled their the Philistine arsenal and their supply troops. So they would have definitely come in contact with them, and they would have had to face them. And they already were afraid of the Egyptian troops, right? So, I'm sorry, not the Philistine, the Egyptian forts and the Egyptian supplies. And so they would have had to face the Egyptian troops, and they were not ready for that. Let's look at the map. But the quickest way to the promised land was just 200 miles. You see that? From Egypt across there to Canaan. 200 miles across the Sinai Peninsula. Can you imagine the pillar of fire starts to guide them in the wrong direction? Okay, wait a minute. First of all, try to imagine this divine GPS. Now imagine that it's defective. Hey God, we're supposed to be going northeast, but you are taking us south. He's taking them south on the desert road. Yahweh has no sense of direction? I don't think so. So, hey, that's not what it is. It's that God sometimes takes us the opposite direction of what we think or where we think we should be going. And when He does this, we need to trust Him. God redirects your experiences, because He knows the plans He has for you, and they're plans to prosper you and not harm you, even if it seems like you're walking through the pillar of fire instead of behind it. And that's certainly what they were thinking. The Israelites had been in Egypt a long time, and they had no idea that after the Egyptian troops, the Philistines they would encounter in that land. And they wouldn't have been able to face them. They weren't ready for that. And so God redirects their experience. He redirects their path. And they would have become fearful. Remember when they were in the Red Sea, right? They're crossing the Red Sea, and they said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt?" Have you ever felt trapped? That's exactly what the Israelites felt, with the Red Sea on one side and the Egyptians on the other side. Where was their trust? God had just saved their firstborn sons by the blood of the Lamb. They had seen signs and wonders of all the plagues, yet they still feared and did not trust God. There's a common acronym for fear. It's false evidence appearing real. Fear keeps us bound, while trust sets us free. It appears or seems real, but it is actually not concrete or tangible, the actual fear, right? You see, they had a lack of faith because they hadn't made their relationship with God tangible. They hadn't touched the hem of His garment yet, figuratively. It was still intangible. And because he's reaching out to them, but they weren't reaching out to him yet. Has God become real to you? Not real and just like he's out there somewhere, but in a real way for that you believe in him, that the Bible is his word to you, your daily bread. And it becomes the standard in your life. When he becomes your reality, you are able to let go of the lies that you've believed. The secret to letting go is to focus on God's faithfulness in the past. Now, if you're just starting a relationship with him, that's when you go to his word and you say, wow, I see what he did for Deborah. Wow, I see what he did for the woman at the well. And you see, and it builds your faith and your trust in him. And I bet you can think, if you just started walking with Jesus, you can think, wow, I probably should have died that time I was at blah, 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 blah. Or God really intervened and I didn't recognize it this time or that time. Could be from childhood. All of those things, because he does have a purpose and a plan for your life. And the most important purpose is that you spend eternity with him. God wants to release us from our fears so that we can overcome all things through him who gives us strength. Let go of the fear of being disappointed. Let go of the fear of not having enough. Let go of the fear of failing. Let go of the fear of appearing foolish before men. Those are just a few of the fears that I have had to let go of so that I could embrace my relationship with Christ. Okay, enough about me. Let's get back to the Israelites. Even though God knew the Israelites would one day be able to conquer the Philistines, we know that through David and Goliath, right? He helped them to avoid the Philistines now. Through John the Baptist, we learned that God uses desert moments to prepare us, and that's exactly what he's going to do. His intention was, not for 40 years in the desert, right? But his intention was to use the desert to prepare and teach the Israelites, because they had been a slave nation for 400 years. They had mostly forgotten their identity, or didn't know what was going on in the world because they were just enslaved in Egypt. So God wanted to use the desert to prepare them. God is all about preparing you for battle. Let me say that again. He's all about preparing you for battle. It is your spiritual formation to conquer one fear at a time. Sometimes when we're at the altar and we're saying, God, just take this from me, take it all, and then we face it again, right? It might not be as emotionally charged as the previous time, but we're like, I thought I got over this. It's because we can't handle for him to just pluck it out at one time. He uses our spiritual formation, to conquer one issue, one fear, one bondage at a time. God takes us through the desert to prepare us for the Philistines in our lives. But we have to conquer the Egyptians first. We have to be released from the bondage. Be released. Don't go back. You cross the Red Sea that you have to face in your life. Don't return. Don't return to the bondage, my friends. So let's fast forward through Exodus, Leviticus, and the first part of Numbers. I'm going to go back to the map, okay? And we're going to go all the way down and start to head north. Here we go. So the Israelites go south to Marah. This is where the Lord healed the bitter waters. Then to Elam, where Israel camped by the 12 springs. And despite the desert of sin being a hostile environment of sand and stone, the Israelites have daily provisions of manna and quail and water. What a perfect place to shape some character, as he previously did in their leader, Moses. He used his first 40 years, right? Next, we see them defeat their first enemy, the Amalekites, a fierce nomadic tribe named after Amalek, a grandson of Esau. In fact, one of the greatest insults in Israelite culture was to call them a friend of Amalek. Additionally, Rephidim, where they fought, is the place God provided water from a rock. You see that down towards the bottom? And then we're finally going to be at Mount Sinai. where the Israelites received the Ten Commandments and construct the tabernacle in the Sinai wilderness. Are you still with me? Okay. We are finally headed north. We are in the wilderness camps where the 70 elders were called to help Moses govern. The elders were called because the Israelites complained about wanting meat. They got quail, they got manna, but they want to be complainers. In Numbers 11, let's look at that. In Numbers 11, I guess you really don't have it, but in Numbers 11 it says, the rabble with them began to crave other food, and again, I do have it. Again, the Israelites started wailing. Okay, the rabble is a mixed crowd. It's the Egyptians that followed them out, some of the Egyptians and some of the other slave nations that the Egypt had taken, and so it's a mixed crowd. And not to say that there weren't Israelites complaining, but it's a mixed crowd, okay? So the Israelites bit off more than they could chew when they did this, when they are hanging around the wrong crowd, right? It says bad company corrupts good morals, and this is for adults too. We become like them instead of them becoming like us. While we are called to be salt and light, there's a balance as we interact with those who don't know Jesus. We're supposed to, but we need to have balance in our life so that we are not just always eating with sinners and tax collectors and never being in community with other believers, okay? You must recognize your enemies. They were plagued because they were their own enemy. What is the enemy of your soul? Is it dissatisfaction? Is it greed? Is it doubt? If we don't give in and we stand firm, we will see the deliverance of the Lord. Furthermore, our victory is sometimes delayed because we don't recognize the enemy. So we delayed the victory. This is when we sometimes self-sabotage, right? Have you ever done that to yourself? You sabotage yourself? We have been taken captive by the guilt of a parent, the condemnation of a spouse, the unrealistic expectations of a leader. That's when we self-sabotage ourselves because we allow that stuff in instead of putting a boundary there or confronting it or both, right? And we remained imprisoned by our own volition. No one does anything to you that you don't allow them to do. I often reference this when I do marriage counseling, and they'll say, well, my husband did this, or my wife does this, and then that's why they act the way that they do. And I say, no one can do to you what you don't allow them to do. That's where boundaries come in. And boundaries are a measurement of love. They're a measurement of love for yourself, for your children, for your spirituality. And sometimes, let me qualify this. Sometimes people do things to us. Like I told you, I had a horrible year last year. I was slandered, lied about, all the things. And I couldn't stop that from happening. Well, maybe I could have if I would have recognized my enemy. Maybe I could have. But it happened, but I could keep it from happening again. I could distance myself. I could respond the way that God wanted me to respond, which was by not responding at all and being honest. And so those are the things. So I can keep that from happening again. That's what I mean by that. God told Moses, what did he tell Moses? He said, destroy your enemies and the idols in your life. I agree with the idols in your life. Don't destroy your enemies. To soften it a bit, we could do as Paul tells us in Colossians 3. He tells us to throw away our old way of living, right? And move ahead into a new life of love and faith. Colossians 3. In obedience to God. Now they're still complaining, but now they're complaining about something else. They're complaining about the enemies that they see. Check this out. The Lord hates us. He brought us out of Egypt to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us. Where can we go? Our brothers have made our hearts melt in fear. They say, the people are stronger and taller than we are. The cities are large, with walls up to the sky. We even saw the Anakites there. So the Anakites are the ancestors of Goliath. They're the giant people. And so the spies report back in Numbers 13, remember Joshua and Caleb and the 10 other spies, they report that there's giants in the land. And so what happens? Fear creeps back in. And they are like, oh, is there probably, again, why didn't you just, weren't there graves in Egypt, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? So they let fear creep back in. You see, fear will take root, and we forget about the miracles of God. But if we release the fear and we release it and we recognize it, right? We recognize that enemy. I'm not going to, nope, not going there. We release the fear, then we can recognize the enemy more clearly. There are patterns that we fall into. And so we have to ask ourselves, why do we fall into those patterns? I reference disappointment. So if you are, or dissatisfaction, if you're dissatisfied, why? Is that if the fear is dissatisfaction, why? Because you think you're not enough. If it's greed, is greed your enemy? The enemy of your soul? Because you want more and you want more. Well, why? Because you're afraid you're afraid you won't have enough. Is it doubt? Why? Because you're afraid God's not enough. You have to release the fear so you can recognize the enemy for who and what it is. Release it for who and what it is. So look how Moses responds. Do not be terrified. Do not be afraid of them. The Lord your God, who is going before you, will fight for you as he did for you in Egypt, before your very eyes. Can you imagine how frustrated he is? And in the wilderness. There you saw how the Lord your God carried you as a father carries his son all the way you went until you reached this place. In spite of this, you did not trust in the Lord your God, who went ahead of you on your journey in fire by night and in a cloud by day to search out places for you to camp and to show you the way that you should go. Wow. Okay, he's saying, look at the miracles of the past. God is faithful. Do not fear. Faith over fear. Faith over fear. I reference this verse because it sums up the Israelites' time in the desert, especially in Kadesh, the oasis where they spent most of the time. They're like 37 years of the 40, right? And so there were enemies along the way, but they defeated them. And now they're like, fear, we can't do this, we can't do this. And the point is they didn't circle for all those years because of the enemy, because of other men, whether large or not. They circled because of themselves. They circled because of the condition of their hearts. And that's what God cares about. He cares about your heart. God's purpose was deeper than from taking them from point A to point B, from Egypt to Canaan. Yes, it was the land he promised to them, but his purpose was much bigger than that. His purpose was not the promise in the land, but it was in his chosen people. He wanted them. He wanted them. He wanted a relationship with them. So follow God's direction. He wants to release you from your fears and help you recognize your enemies so that you can receive an exodus. Proverbs tells us the steps of a righteous man or woman are ordered by God. That's you. So have confidence in him. Remember all he's done for you, and you will receive your exodus. Thank you.